This is part 2 of the Roman Empire series. If you haven't watched part 1, go do it now. Just click on the link in the description. Now, when we left off, Rome had expanded past its 117 AD borders, which looked like this. Rome now had expanded even more into Germanic lands and dominates what today is southern Germany and Bavaria. After brief insurrections between the German tribes and the Roman legions, a peace is settled, and after somehow defeating all of the invading tribes, the Huns included, the Romans stop invading and begin building new cities and infrastructure in Germania, Gaul, Britannia, and the Iberian Peninsula. With this new colonization, Rome's higher class begins to move to these colonies in Gaul and Germania and act as leaders to the new city. Eventually, lower class citizens move in and the population of the new towns grow. These new towns come in conflict with the conquered peoples who fight against the colonies and attack in numbers. These attacks lead the Romans to begin sending more troops into colonies and wiping out tribes who rebelled against the Roman rule. This process would not be in a matter of a few years, but decades of individual conflicts with locals and the building up of Roman cities. Eventually, for the oversimplification of things, Rome establishes clear dominant control over the areas of influence by the 400s, and the areas of which Rome conquered begin to be influenced by the Roman culture. So in our timeline, Rome's empire was subject to a period called the Migration Period, which was a time when multiple tribes and people migrated from their native land and into the Roman provinces. Many of these tribes never left and formed the basis for modern countries and groups in Europe. The Angles, Saxons, and Jutes migrated from Denmark into Britain and took over from a collapsing Roman influence on the island. Many different tribes and people invaded modern-day France, Spain, and Italy, so these invasions had a big impact on the modern-day societies which formed from former Roman provinces, and if Rome was able to hold them, then countries like France, Britain, Germany, and Spain never would have rose. And the lands which consisted of these countries would be very Romanized, looking much more like Italian and Greek cities than Northern European cities. And what would be one consequence of this? In this Roman society, there would be drastic class and wealth differences between the ruling Romans and the native tribes. Romans traditionally let tribes live in peace as long as they didn't create trouble. So if a tribe wasn't a bother to Rome, they weren't killed off or sold to slavery. If the Romans and tribes stayed in this area for hundreds of more years than in our timeline, then it is reasonable to assume some form of ethnic hate would be shared between the two. The tribes would stick to their various languages while the Romans spoke Latin. The tribes would live in their villages while only a little bit away rose new Roman cities. These cities which would expand to accommodate for a growing population and for farming. Not a recipe for peace. All over Europe, there would be a vast difference in wealth between the traditional Romans and the tribes which lived in poverty due to losing land and hunting grounds. In a few hundred years, these lands would be seen as strongly Latin provinces, almost erasing the native cultures completely and either killing or assimilating the tribes. Anyway, another factor that led to the demise of Rome was Christianity. Now, why was this? Simple. Too much differences between the traditional various gods of the Romans and the new religion of Christianity. For 2.5 centuries, the Romans persecuted the Christians and, killed their leader. So when Constantine the Great became a Christian and legalized Christianity, there was some backlash. One, this caused even more tension between the native tribes and the Romans. Two, this caused a stir in the military ranks when religious differences began to divide the army. And 3, taxes were affected, and the entire system fell apart. After making Christianity the state religion, the empire collapsed within 80 years, which may seem like a long time, but for Rome, that was very sudden. So how would have Rome been able to survive? Well, for one thing, they would have never legalized Christianity. I'm not going to talk about religion, but from a purely political view, Christianity caused a rift in the empire. Armies became disloyal, and many factions rose from this new decision. If Rome wouldn't have legalized Christianity, that would have helped them survive, but also Christianity would not be the dominant religion in Europe, if at all. Perhaps in this scenario, Christians would have the same populations of Jews, and their communities would be very similar and close by. Their populations would have to move outside Roman borders to escape persecution and create small settlements in modern Ukraine. We haven't really talked about the rest of the world in this scenario, and how about we do that next time? Until then, like us on Facebook and subscribe if you have not done so. This is Cody from the Alternate History Hub.